If you did the other ones already, I'll still give you credit.
Wait.
That's okay. Okay.
What page is that?
This is page 520, number 14. So it's a review problem. So it's not from the problem set, lesson 9-6. It's from the review assignment, page 520. But it's like a problem on lesson 9-6. Okay? And we're going to talk about confidence intervals here. St. Petersburg, Russia has 207 foggy days out of 365 days. So let's say that St. Petersburg is our first sample. So our first sample proportion, p hat sub 1, will be 207 out of 365. While Stockholm, Sweden has 166 foggy days out of 365. So Stockholm will be our second sample group. And p hat sub 2, it's our second sample proportion, is 166 out of 365. At alpha equal 0.02, can it be concluded that the proportion of foggy days for the two cities are different? So we're trying to figure out, the claim, it sounds like to me, is that the proportion of foggy days is not equal. This is what the claim is. If you're going to write a null, you'd write that they are equal. The null would be that proportion 1 equals proportion 2. The alternative would be that they're not equal. Okay? Now, we could do a hypothesis test and decide whether to reject or not reject the null, and decide whether the evidence supports the claim or does not support the claim. But I'm going to skip over that and just do the confidence interval to make this decision, because I haven't really reviewed confidence intervals very much. Here's the formula for the confidence interval for the difference between two proportions. So you start by subtracting the two proportions. So you're going to go p hat sub 1 minus p hat sub 2. So 207 over 365 minus 166 over 365 minus your z-score. So you're going to need to look up a z-score of alpha equal 0.02, which would be a 98% confidence interval. So what we're talking about here is 98% of the area is going to be in the middle here. 2% of the area will be out in the tails. So 2% divided by 2, that would be 1% would be here. 1% would be here. So if you take 0.5 minus 0.01, you get 0.49. So you can look up your z-score on the chapter 7 formula sheet that I've given you at the bottom of that, or you can go to your z-chart and try to find 0.4900. That's how you can find your z-score if you didn't have your chapter 7 formula sheet available. So what would my z-score be then? 2.33. Thank you. 2.3.03. That sound right to other people too? Anyone else look? Okay. So our z-score is going to be 2.33 times the square root. Then you're going to do p hat 1 times q hat 1. How do you figure out, if you know p hat 1 is this, how are you going to figure out q hat? Right. Q hat sub 1, squeeze it in here. Let's write it over here. Q hat sub 1 will be 1 minus 207 over 365. So Q hat sub 1 would be 158 over 365. And let's do Q hat sub 2. That would be 1 minus Q hat sub 1. So Q hat sub 2 would be 1 minus 166 over 365. Which I believe would be 199 over 365. Questions about that? Okay, let's start plugging in the numbers then. So p hat sub 1, we said was, I'll find it again, 207 over 365 times q hat sub 1, which was 158 over 365. That's an 8 right there. Divided by n sub 1. What's n sub 1? What's the total number of sample days? 365, yeah. Plus, right here now I'm going to do p hat sub 2. P hat sub 2 was 166 over 365. times q hat sub 2, which was 199 over 365. All over n sub 2, which is again 365. When you type it in, you're going to have to do this in pieces. You're probably going to want to type this in, divide by 365, type this in, divide by 365. You're going to want to do that whole expression with a minus once, and then come back and do it with a plus. I'm just going to show it as plus or minus. Now, I'm going to go ahead and give you what the answer book tells us is the answer, and then you can type it in so you can get it to match if you're worried about that. It says that you should come out, when you use a minus, you should come out with 0.026. When you use a plus, you should come out with 0.198. So the difference between the proportions is somewhere between there. In other words, somewhere between 2.6% and 1.98 or 19.8%. So the difference in the two proportions of number of foggy days is somewhere between 2.6% and 19.8%. What number is not on the interval that's kind of important here? 0. 0 does not fall between these numbers, does it? So that means that P1 minus P2, we're 98% certain that P1 minus P2 does not equal 0. If you add P2 to both sides, that means we're 98% sure that P1 is not equal to P2. So, can it be concluded that the proportion of foggy days for the two cities are different? Say yes or no? Yes. We're saying the fact that they're not equal means they're different. Okay, so that would mean the fact that we just figured out they're not equal would mean we would reject the claim, we would reject the null, and we would say there is enough evidence to support the claim that the proportion of foggy days in the two cities is different. And again, that's because 0 did not fall in this interval. If 0 did fall in the interval, if this was a negative number and this was a positive number, then we would say that this could be 0. Any question? So you would, I'm not going to go into, really all I wanted to do here was find this interval. But I want you to be able to explain that because 0 is not between these two numbers, that these two numbers cannot be equal. Any questions about that?
Spring is